About 20 masked men gathered in Shawinigan last week for a white supremacist rally. By now, you've probably seen a picture of the gang holding up a banner that reads, "Je me souviens d'un Québec blanc." If you're worried that such a brazen act of racism and intimidation is in any way connected to our xenophobic politics, don't. Quebec's political columnists have already dismissed this as unrelated to the near constant drumbeat of nativism that has marked the past decade in our province. Just last week, Parti Québécois leader Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon said we should really worry about extremism on both sides. For instance, the extreme right is holding white supremacist rallies. They openly claim Quebecers are being replaced by non-whites. One Quebec-based group, led by former members of the Canadian Forces, was dismantled in 2024 after police seized 16 explosive devices, 83 firearms, and over 10,000 rounds of ammunition from their compound. Yes, they had a compound. The extreme left, meanwhile, is breaking windows and hanging politicians in effigy. So really, this is a both sides kind of problem, right? No, of course not. Some 56% of Quebecers have a negative view or a very negative view of Islam. In the rest of Canada, it's 36%. That's according to an Angus Reid poll published in 2023. And it was a young man radicalized right here in our province who shot and killed 6 people at a Quebec City mosque in 2017. Where does most of that hate come from? The political right. While Quebec's conservative politicians may not literally be saying, "We hate immigrants," here's a list of just some of the things immigrants have been blamed for in the past few years. Quebec's housing crisis, Quebec's healthcare crisis, the decline of French in Quebec, a rise in gang violence, a rise in anti-immigration extremists, the poor quality of Quebec's public schools, the rise in unemployment. At one point or another, immigrants were blamed for just about everything that ails Quebec, not merely by newspaper columnists like Richard Martineau or Mathieu Bock-Côté, but also PSPP, former Premier François Legault, Economic Minister Bernard Drinville. The list goes on. Under normal circumstances, most people would see this for what it is. Good old-fashioned scapegoating by desperate politicians. But we are not living in normal circumstances. We're facing a cost of living crisis that is radicalizing people on the margins. Rents have doubled in the past 10 years. An entire generation has been priced out of buying a home. Meanwhile, the richest 20% of our province, a category that includes our political leaders, owns 60% of the wealth. The rest of us have to fight for whatever is left. That kind of desperation is a dangerous thing to play with. And while I don't think there is a direct line from the politicians to the masked white supremacists in Shawinigan, the political climate in Quebec is worse now than it's been in my lifetime.
Some people, some columnists are blaming the rise of white supremacy in Quebec on American influence, but as you kind of listed, can you tell me a bit about why this is also a reflection of Quebec's influence?
Yeah, well, I think it like you had Paul Journet in La Presse and Michel David. Those are just two people who wrote columns that were like, look, these guys are idiots, but most of what they're spouting sounds a lot more like American extremism than anything that's homegrown. And to a degree, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's impossible not to be influenced by American extremists. They're all over the internet, and one of them is the president. So I can understand a part of that argument, but that argument, it denies the very specifically negative views that Quebecers hold towards Islam. That poll, 56% of Quebecers having either a negative or very negative impression of Islam, that is like 20 points higher than in the rest of Canada. There is something specific in our culture that is hostile towards this particular category. And I think that to ignore that is to give ourselves a pass. And I think it also, it speaks to a political class that seems incapable of criticizing itself. Or, whenever you criticize Quebec, like Arun Boisy, the MNA for Québec Solidaire, did very mildly a couple years back, you get thrown under the bus, even by your own party. So it's like this thing we can't touch or speak of, but there are specifically Quebec parts to this.
Yeah, well, and as someone from Winnipeg, where there's a francophone minority, and also as a member of the Métis Nation, I come here and I hear Quebecois people saying that they're colonized and panicking over the decline of French, and that panic over the decline of French is wrapped up in this sort of nebulous Quebecois perception of Quebecois culture, which it is a distinct thing. And yes, the Anglo dominance is a very real thing, for sure. But
it's not colonization.
They call themselves colonized when there's nations, there's First Nations here that are trying their best to preserve their language, which is really en voie de disparition. And it's a convenient way to sort of link language and white Quebecois identity together to then pass xenophobic policies and say, well, look, we're just protecting Quebecois culture.
Yeah. And also the whole concept of like, je me souviens d'un Québec blanc. Like, I remember a white Quebec. When? Like Quebec is an indigenous territory.
Yeah.
It is not historically a white place.
Yeah.
So that's a revisionist view of things. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon very recently said, well, Quebecers are not people whose lot in life was informed by colonial domination. We did not colonize anybody, which is absurd. It's like was explicitly
true.
a colonial project. Like, why did we convert indigenous people to Catholicism? Why claim this land on behalf of the crown? Like, it is very much it's always been a colonial project. That's not to take away from the domination of the British over the French and the collusion of the Catholic Church and all of this really messy stuff. No one is taking that away. But let's call it like it is. It is a revisionist view to refer to it that way. And when you get to pick and choose, like it's like some politicians and some columnists, they want to be both victim and perpetrator. They want to have all of the benefits of having perpetrated colonialism, dominance over everyone in the province, dominance over the territory, dominance over the law, the ability to change our own constitution whenever we feel like it unilaterally. These are they want this, but then they also want this status as like having been colonized, like a special status within Canada. And while I'm not, denying that like there is always room for that conversation, it's like people have given themselves a pass, where like, no, we're special. We're incapable of racism because we were the victims of colonialism. And that's very dangerous. And I think it's very dangerous for columnists to just totally wash our hands of it, especially when you consider, there was a massacre in 2017 at the Quebec City Mosque. The rise in hate crimes is very well documented, and specifically hate crimes against Muslims. There is a lot of intellectual kind of overlap between some of what Mathieu Bock-Côté is reading and some of what these guys in Shawinigan are reading. Like, it isn't totally divorced. So this desire to wash your hands of it is like, you can't do that. You can't play identity politics the way we have for the last 20 years and then pretend like, oh no, well, when we do it, it's just kind of not serious and we're just using it to sell newspapers.
Yeah, definitely. And these guys who showed up, because I think it was all men, but I'm not sure. I don't want to
Yeah,
assume,
they don't strike me as people who have like, a lot of women in their lives.
It seems, I'm just curious who these guys are, because the columnists are renouncing them, obviously, and like the political class is like, this has nothing to do with us. Who are these guys?
Look, some of them are like straight up weirdos. I came across and maybe Justin can cut to this. I'll send you the link. I came across the Instagram profile of someone who shared the picture and claims to be one of the people in these 20 people. And, you go down the rabbit hole and he has videos of himself just like flexing. And then he's got, and like some of his chest hair is missing. I don't know. Been there.
Okay.
It's strange. It's really
attempted waxing.
I don't know
to make it. Well, actually, some guys wax because it makes their muscles pop more. If you really like get down to the bare. Anyway,
maybe
that's an aside.
Some guys hit themselves in the face with a hammer.
Yeah.
And one of his takes on his Instagram is like, you don't need sunscreen. The sun is going to provide everything for you. And like, motherfucker, that guy in particular, you need sunscreen. If you're out in the sun all the time, your skin's going to peel off, man. You're pale as the goddamn day is long. So this is a tiny fringe minority, right? Like this is a small, they're part of something called the Second Sons, which sounds like it's like something from Game of Thrones. It might be a reference to that. They are a group that has ties to what's called the Frontenac Active Club, which I believe Sean Beauvais McDonald is a part of. He's one of these white supremacist guys who's been around for ages. He went to the Charlottesville rally, I believe. He was part of a white nationalist cell that we investigated when I was at the Gazette. He showed up to Rachel Gilmore's boyfriend's concert performance to like intimidate her. That's what he does. He was boxing in a local gym and he ended up getting kicked out because of his white nationalism. it's a small group of people who have kind of been doing this for a long time, and like young, impressionable men who believe they don't have sunscreen. But it's not like all you need is one of these guys to get a crazy idea and execute it. And that's not outside of the realm of possibilities. That we have radicalism in Quebec, and it's homegrown, and to try to pass it off as somebody else's responsibility is incredibly irresponsible.
Well, like, yeah, Rachel's reporting, she's been mapping the rise of white nationalism in Canada and been harassed for it. They're trying to infiltrate gyms. There was also like a Canada-US movement that a journalist from the Winnipeg Free Press, Ryan Thorpe, like went undercover and reported on, and he also got death threats and stuff. And that reporting came out in like the late 2010s. So it has been a movement that has been happening, that has been homegrown here as well as in the US. It's not an isolated, it's not like, oh, these guys are all just like listening to Nick Fuentes and parroting back what he's saying.
And I'm sure they are listening
some
to
of them,
Nick Fuentes.
like, obviously there's influence there, but it's also a movement that is happening in Canada.
Well, let me take some of the headlines from the Journal de Montréal about anti-white racism. So these are some from Mathieu Bocoté. I'll read them in French. You get the idea. Montréal, ville raciste contre les Blancs. Racisme systémique. Pourquoi il faut refuser ce concept? Pourquoi est-il permis de mépriser les Blancs? La discrimination raciale est permise et même encouragée si elle vise les hommes blancs. Le racisme anti-blanc toléré au Québec. Profilage racial, mon œil. It goes on and on and on. And I mean, Richard Martineau, between 2006 and 2014, he's a columnist at the most read newspaper in Quebec. He wrote 438 columns about Islam. They were all negative. It wasn't like, hey, let's look at it in a nuanced way. That's one column a week for 6 years.
Yeah.
That is a drumbeat of just constant nativism, and it makes the extremists in our society feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
It makes them feel as though their opinions are shared.
It moves the Overton window.
It moves the Overton window.
Like, and it's irresponsible to say that Quebec culture or Quebec politics or Quebec columnists have zero influence on, there's like, this is all an import. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, when you put all of this data together, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Even if these guys aren't outright, even if these columnists, even if the politicians who deny systemic racism, even if they're not out here being like, oh yeah, we're white supremacists, like we're scared of white people getting replaced. Even if they're not coming out and saying that, the anti-immigrant / oh, there's racism against white people angle, that fuels the fire, right?
Yeah, and it's something that has been pushed, like racism against white people, that's been pushed by Jean-François Lisée, the former leader of the PQ. You know, it's kind of been pushed by people in PSPP's inner circle. It's the kind of thing where they will, like the PQ, you could talk about American influence, but a lot of their leanings most recently, they sound very European. The
anti-hijab laws, like that's an import from France.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No. And like, so they are, and the crazy thing is, like, you have Mathieu Bocoté commenting on Quebec politics. Like, you live in France, dude. You don't live here. You don't speak for us. I think it's, again, like I don't know that we're ready to have this conversation, but we have to have this conversation that, like, you cannot have a political system that scapegoats minorities this much without there being some kind of consequence. It might not always be lethal, but, and look, this shit happens in the rest of Canada too.
Yes.
There were Muslims killed outside of a mosque in London, Ontario. There was the National Council of Canadian Muslims says there's been a 1,000% increase in reported hate incidents against Muslims since October 7th, 2023. Like, this happens everywhere, but we also, like, very much need to look in the mirror and to say, and like one of the columnists said, well, look, some of these groups are federalist groups, and stop making this about, like, whatever politics. Like, let's all at least agree that we need to do better. And I think too many people see some kind of a political advantage in scapegoating or othering people. And unfortunately, until there's a political price paid for it, it's just going to keep happening. And I don't see there being a large price to that to be paid just yet.
Yeah, and the specificity of Quebec's context as well is, again, that perception that they see themselves as colonized. So if you say, hey, you're being like, this policy seems racist, or this policy seems like it's disproportionately affecting Muslim women or whatever, they fall back on well, we're just protecting our culture that is en voie de disparition, right? Like that's sort of what it's like, no, we're just protecting our national identity. And that is the argument that
it's
a lot of other...
It's hard because you're like in popular culture, there's that song like don't like we promote this like idealized version of the past when like no, the Catholic Church dominated our lives. We were francophones in Quebec were kind of like forced to have all these babies and to like live this life of constant subjugation. And I don't look back to the years of Maurice Duplessis fawningly and thinking, oh, we're losing some of that. Cultures change, cultures evolve, languages change, languages evolve. The English language probably has more French-rooted words in it than English words. These things change over time. Nothing is static in history. We're clinging to something that never really existed. We think of this idealized past instead of looking across the table to people who might not look exactly like us, but who want to build a nation with us or who want to build a better society. They speak French, we speak French. Maybe they practice a different religion. Maybe their culture is a little different than ours. But instead of focusing on why that's a bad thing, why not just be neighbors? Yeah,
well, and I'll just quickly say that in Winnipeg, I went to school in the Francophone school division and then did some, worked at some of the schools as I got older. And it's like we had people from African countries working there and studying there. And we also had hijabi women teaching or being educational assistants or whatever. It was a non-issue because in Manitoba, truly French is people are working hard to preserve the language there because it truly is in the middle of a there's a reason why I have an anglicized accent. My mom was Anglophone, and also a lot of the world around me was Anglophone. And it's Francophone schools see the value in having, someone from other countries coming to speak beautiful French and help teach kids because they need the staff. A lot of people from Quebec also moved to Winnipeg to teach at schools too. So I had Quebecois teachers, white Quebecois teachers. I had people from different French-speaking countries in Africa. There were Muslim teachers as well. It was just we're all speaking French here. We're all,
we have a common goal.
Exactly. So it's it's always ironic to me to see that shutting people out, especially from francophone countries, when you're saying at the same time, oh, but le français est en voie de disparition, on panique.
Yeah,
right.
And for some reason, that conversation very rarely actually involves French communities in the rest of Canada.
Oh yeah, no, they don't talk about us. They don't talk about us.
It's you want a solution, move to Quebec.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, but then I'll speak French in my accent, and then people will switch to English with me sometimes. So it's all right. Yeah, I also wanted to ask you about the Bouchard-Taylor Commission. There have been studies on sort of accommodating for religious minorities in the context of Quebec, and this commission.
Yeah, well, so it's hard to talk in the sort of in the post 9/11 period. There was an increase in Muslim immigration to Canada, and there was just more visible Muslims, and a lot of people were made really uncomfortable by that, and which happens in a society. But what the Bouchard-Taylor Commission found was the media amplified very small anecdotes about, a Muslim family going to a cabane à sucre and asking for halal options. These tiny little private accommodations were turned into this crisis of we are being replaced. And what the commission found was it was a manufactured crisis. And a lot of the lessons that were learned by the political parties at the time was, manufactured or not, this crisis is getting people excited. And that excitement is translating to political donations, it's translating to political involvement, and it's translating to political gains. Again, there has not been that much backlash against these kinds of politics. Should it happen in the future, maybe we'll see a sea change in Quebec, but I'm not holding my breath.